There are many ways when it comes to Islam. Some come from no religion, some come from other religious traditions, and some are born into it. Regardless of how you came into it, you're a part of something big. We have inherited a movement that has done much more good for mankind than harm. We have a system in our religion that allows us to cooperate because we have a basic set of shared values. No matter where you go in the world, when you're among Muslims, there is at least some basic understanding. There are people like me who were born into the black ghetto experience. Back in the 70s, we didn't even have a name. They called us all kinds of names. They called us colored, Negro, black, Afro-American, and finally African-American. Folks would look at me and they'd say, "You're not black." And they'd say, "You never been to no Africa." Well, they had me on technicalities. I gravitated to Islam following the legend of Malcolm X. At that time, it wasn't as much religious as political, and just feeling alone. When I looked at Martin Luther King, he represented black Southern Christian tradition. He kept talking about nonviolence, when all around me there was nothing but violence. Malcolm was something else. He didn't advocate violence per se, but he didn't rule it out either. More importantly, he told us that as Muslims, we would be part of a worldwide community of billions of people. Africans, Asians, and Arabs were all brothers in this thing called Islam. I could see they were disciplined. They didn't drink alcohol and they didn't eat pork, no matter what. And that was true as far as I knew in all their countries. Malcolm even said that Egypt, the place where they built all the pyramids, was in Africa. Sure enough, when I looked on the map with new eyes, I found out that it was. I was hooked. Man, it was pretty cool being a Muslim in America. That wasn't until September 11th, 2001. That's when we became part of the news. And whenever anything happened, you had to hope that not only was the accused person not black, but you had to also hope that he didn't have a Muslim name. Man, before those fools took over the news, at least in my community, if you were a practicing Muslim, you got respect. People knew, especially if you weren't one of those Nation of Islam types, that there were some things you just would not do. There were some things you just wouldn't be involved in. Then, well, just like a poison gas, a foreign ideology of hate and exclusion began to be whispered about. People became incensed about foreign things, obscure slights in distant lands. Nonsense started to be passed off as common sense, and too many Muslim names were in the news. It's easy to become overwhelmed. You hear it all the time. The economy, corruption, debt, deficit, all that. Billions of people on the planet. There's a war here, a war there. Somebody blew somebody up and people are starving, drowning, getting sick with things you can't even pronounce. 10 billion for this, 100 billion for that. How much is a billion anyway? Well, it's 1,000 million. That's a lot. It used to be a big number. Budgets of cities are in billions of dollars, thousands of millions. To count $1 billion worth of $100 bills at 1 bill per second would take you roughly 16 and a half weeks non-stop. Computers, which used to store several hundred pages of data when I was a boy, now stores so much information that we have to use terms that were never heard before. Terabyte is a common amount of storage on a laptop computer, 1,000 gigabytes. Many companies have archives of a petabyte of data or more. That's 1,000 terabytes and onward. Things start to move too fast. There's too much noise. It becomes unbearable, so we want to withdraw, shut down. We want to be left alone. We don't have time to get involved. The problems are too big. Where would one start anyway? There's nothing I can do. It's not my fault. I didn't do anything to anyone. Don't look at me. It's beyond human scale. What is human scale? Well, let's look at the measurements we use every day. There's the inch. That's from the Latin punica, meaning 1/12. In other languages, it means a thumb, which amazingly is about 1 inch long. A foot, surprise, is somewhere around 12 inches. At least on my son it is. A yard is about the length of a man's arm. We can wrap our heads around these measurements. This is not an argument against the metric system. I'm just saying that there's a place for all of us and we can understand things. There's a need for all of us too. Everyone can become part of a movement, and the time is now. Movement? What's that? Sounds like trouble. I don't want the FBI coming after me, man. As Muslims, we're already part of a movement. We are part of a believers' movement. A movement that was reignited in Arabia in the 7th century rather, by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Notice I said reignited. There were already believers in Arabia before the Prophet was born. There were Christians and Jews in Arabia and elsewhere, people who believed in the same one God that we believe in. The exact same and only God that there has ever been. The God of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. We are not part of some new religion. We are not an upstart faith. We merely affirm our faith in the one God and take further guidance from the last book that God has given us as guidance, the noble Quran. The Christians didn't have Ramadan fasting. So what was Prophet Muhammad about if he was not bringing a new faith? The Quran states that the Prophet is merely a warner. Look at Quran 32:3. Rather it, O Lord, O Muhammad, that you may warn a people to whom no warner has come before, so perhaps they will be guided. In Quran 43:23, we sent not a warner before you, O Muhammad, to any town or people, but the luxurious ones among them said, we found our fathers following a certain way in religion, and we will indeed follow their footsteps. The Prophet was sent to Arabia to let the people there know what had happened to other people in biblical times, who continued their idol worship and other behaviors after they had been warned. He was given a text that helped him form a model community that showed there was another way to live beside the old ways. That's the Quran. There was a tradition of idol worship among most of the people in Arabia at that time who had not been exposed to monotheistic religion. These ignorant people also had many nasty habits mentioned in the Quran, such as burying female children alive, see Quran 81:8, depriving widows of their inheritance, see Quran 89:19, swearing oaths and not keeping their word. Most importantly, they did not have a concept of there being any consequence for their actions beyond those that could be immediately dealt with outside this world.